Imagine for a second that you're sitting in a theater. But we aren't talking about Broadway, and we're definitely not talking about your local AMC.
Not even close.
You are in Athens. It's the year 472 BC. The stone benches are hard. The Mediterranean sun is blazing down on your neck, and you are packed in, shoulder to shoulder with thousands of other Athenian citizens.
And that air, it wouldn't just be hot, it would be electric. The tension would be almost unbearable.
Electric with political and emotional tension.
Absolutely. We have to remember that the City Dionysia Festival wasn't just, an arts festival. It was a civic duty. It was a religious act, and it was a fierce competition all rolled into one.
Right, because the play you are about to watch isn't some ancient myth about gods and monsters from 1,000 years ago. It's not about Hercules or Zeus or even the Trojan War.
No, this is recent history. It's about something that happened practically yesterday.
8 years ago.
8 years. In the grand scheme of things, that's the blink of an eye. It's still fresh. The wounds, they haven't even really scarred over yet.
8 years is nothing. That's like a filmmaker today releasing a major high-budget drama about the very first days of the pandemic or, a war that just ended last month.
And the playwright. We're talking about Aeschylus.
Yeah.
And he's just some writer sitting in an ivory tower speculating on human nature. He's a veteran.
A veteran.
We know for a fact he fought at Marathon. And it's almost certain he fought in the very battle being depicted on stage.
So he saw it. He was there.
He was there. And the audience, they aren't passive observers either. Half the men in that crowd probably fought too. They're sitting next to the empty spaces on the benches where their brothers, their fathers, and their sons used to sit.
Wow.
And now they're settling in to watch a play called The Persians.
Which makes it the oldest surviving Greek tragedy we have. It's literally the first one in the historical record that's complete. And it's unique, like you said, because it is the only one we have that is based on recent history rather than myth. It's contemporary drama.
It is. It's basically frontline reporting, but in the form of high art.
But here's the hook. And this is what really grabbed me when we started digging into this stack of sources. You'd expect a play written by a victor about a war they just won against this massive, terrifying empire. You'd expect it to be a victory lap, right?
That's the logical assumption. Chest-thumping, flag-waving.
Look how great we are.
We won, they lost, we are the best. That's the stuff of propaganda. Usually when a nation writes about a war it won, the enemy is depicted as a monster or a fool, and the home team are flawless heroes.
Exactly. But the Persians, it's a ghost story.
It really is.
It is dark, it's haunting. It isn't set in Athens celebrating the win. It's set in the enemy's capital, Susa. And instead of cheering Greek heroes, we spend the whole play watching the Persian king, Xerxes, return home in rags, literally wailing in grief.
It features these ominous dreams, necromancy, actually summoning the dead, and a king who is just completely undone.
Yeah.
It's a profound subversion of expectation.
So it isn't a celebration of Greek power.
No, it's a dark lament. It's a meditation on human fragility and the terrifying cost of arrogance. It actually asks the victors to weep for the vanquished.
Which is just incredible to think about. So that leads us to our mission for this deep dive. We've got this stack of sources in front of us, the original text of the play by Aeschylus, translated by Gilbert Murray. We have some heavy theological analysis, and then a bunch of New Testament studies on humility and leadership.
A really interesting mix.
And we are going to try to answer a very specific question. Why should a modern Christian listen to a pagan tragedy about a Persian king?
It's a fair question. We often stay in our lane. We read the Bible, maybe some Christian devotionals or theology. Why go all the way back to 472 BC to read a pagan playwright? What spiritual value could possibly be there in the theater of Dionysus?
And the answer, I think, brings us to this really cool concept of plundering the Egyptians, which, I'll admit, it sounds a bit criminal. I feel like I need a mask just saying it.
It does sound a bit illicit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's a classic metaphor from St. Augustine, from his work on Christian doctrine. And the idea is that all truth is God's truth, wherever you happen to find it.
Okay.
So when the Israelites left Egypt in the book of Exodus, God commanded them to take the gold and silver of the Egyptians with them. And what did they eventually do with all that treasure?
It built the tabernacle.
Exactly. They didn't make idols with it, not permanently anyway. They eventually used it to build the tabernacle for the worship of Yahweh. So the gold was Egyptian. It came from a pagan source, but its purpose became holy.
Okay, so we can take the insights, the beauty, the gold from a source like Aeschylus and repurpose it.
Precisely. We can use it to glorify Christ. We can extract the truth Aeschylus uncovered about human nature, about sin, about pride, and let it point us to the only real solution for that sin.
So we're mining for gold in ancient Greece today.
We are. Because Aeschylus, even though he was a pagan, he tapped into a fundamental spiritual law. He understood, maybe not in biblical terms, but he understood that pride goes before destruction. He understood the concept of hubris.
And if we look really closely at this tragedy, specifically in the tragic figure of King Xerxes, we see something, well, of something remarkable.
Hmm.
This is the thesis we're going to be working with today, and I absolutely love this image. We are going to look at King Xerxes as a negative photo of Jesus Christ.
That is the key.
Yeah.
That's the key to this whole discussion. Think about old film photography. When you look at a negative, the dark parts are light and the light parts are dark. Everything is inverted.
Right.
Xerxes shows us the exact opposite of the path of Christ. He shows us in agonizing detail what happens when a man tries to grasp at equality with God.
And later on, we'll bring in Philippians chapter 2 to show the positive photo, the developed print, if you will. What happens when God voluntarily becomes man?
But to get there, we have to start with the story itself. We have to understand the tragedy before we can really appreciate the remedy. We need to feel the weight of the air to understand the beauty of the truth.
All right, so let's dive into the sources. We've got the play itself, the Persians, and we have the historical context. Set the stage for us. The Battle of Salamis has just happened.
That's right. So we're in the aftermath of 480 BC. The Persian Empire is the absolute superpower of the day. We are talking about a landmass that stretches from modern-day India all the way to Ethiopia.
That's huge.
It's staggering.
Yeah.
At the time, it controlled something like 44% of the world's entire population. It's wealthy beyond imagination. It seems completely unstoppable. And the king, Xerxes, has decided he's going to crush these tiny, annoying Greek city-states once and for all.
So it really is David versus Goliath, but Goliath has 1 million soldiers and a navy that literally covers the sea.
That's a perfect analogy. But the play, interestingly, doesn't show us the battle first. It opens in Susa, the Persian capital. But Xerxes isn't there.
Yeah.
He's away at war. The stage is filled with the chorus.
The Persian elders.
Exactly. Aeschylus calls them the Persians' trust.
So these are the old men left behind to, guard the bank accounts while the young men go off to die?
That's a cynical way to put it, but it's not wrong. They are the guardians of the wealth, the golden palaces. And in a deeper sense, they represent the collective conscience of the state.
And the vibe. You said it earlier, it's not confident.
Oh no, it is anxious. Deeply, deeply anxious. The play opens with this long, rhythmic chant.
The text describes them listing off all the names of the commanders who went to war. Amistras, Artaphernes, Megabates. It just goes on and on. Why this laundry list of names?
Well, it does two things. First, it emphasizes the sheer scale of this expedition. Aeschylus uses a very specific poetic meter here, anapestic, which has this da-da-doom rhythm. It feels like an endless army marching past you.
Oh, that's cool.
He's overwhelming the audience with the magnitude of the Persian forces. He calls them the Golden Host. He talks about the bow that smites afar. They list all the different nationalities. The Egyptians, Lydians, the Babylonians. It's this massive, multinational war machine.
So it's impressive.
It's incredibly impressive. But that's the first thing it does. The second thing, and this is the more important one, is that by naming them, he's humanizing them. These aren't just faceless hordes. These are men with names, with families. And the silence from the front lines is deafening.
No news is not good news.
In this case, it's the worst news. They haven't heard a word. It's the calm before the storm. And into this atmosphere of dread walks Queen Atossa,
The Queen Mother.
Xerxes' mom, and the widow of the previous great king, Darius. She enters in a chariot, just dripping with imperial dignity. She represents the glory and stability of the empire. But underneath all that finery, she is terrified.
She's had a dream. And in ancient tragedy, nothing good ever happens after someone says, I had a dream last night. It's basically a spoiler alert for disaster.
Never. Dreams in Greek tragedy aren't just, your brain processing the day's events. They are messages from the divine. They are warnings of a reality that hasn't quite hit yet.
So what did she see?
Atossa describes this vision of two women. They're sisters, she says, very tall, flawless in their beauty. One is wearing these elaborate Persian robes. The other is in simple Dorian or Greek robes.
So you've got the two superpowers personified as sisters. That's an interesting choice by Aeschylus, isn't it? Making them related.
It is. It suggests a common humanity, a kind of natural bond that is about to be violently broken. And in the dream, a discord rises up between them. They start to quarrel. And Xerxes, her son, the king, tries to stop the fighting.
How does he do it?
This is the key. He tries to yoke them both to his chariot.
He tries to harness them like horses. He wants to treat entire nations like cattle.
Exactly. He tries to restrain them under his control, to force them into his service. And the Persian sister, she submits. The text says she is proud of the harness. She represents the obedient subjects of the East who are used to monarchy. But the Greek sister,
She's not having it.
not at all. She struggles, she breaks the yoke, she tears the harness to pieces and throws Xerxes out of the chariot.
And there he is, the great king, lying in the dirt.
And his father, the dead King Darius, is standing there pitying him. And the dream ends with Xerxes seeing his father, and in that moment he tears his own robes in shame.
This is the core metaphor of the whole play, isn't it? The yoke.
It is. It's the central driving image. The yoke represents the attempt to enslave the free. But as we're going to see, it represents something even bigger. It represents the attempt to control nature itself, to bind what should not be bound.
So Atassa wakes up from this absolute nightmare. She shakes it off and she goes to the altar to offer incense. She's trying to, pray the bad omen away?
She is. She's trying to appease the gods. But then as she's there, she sees another omen, this time in the waking world. She sees an eagle, which is the symbol of royalty of Zeus, of power flying to the temple of Apollo. But it's being chased.
By a hawk.
By a hawk.
Ah.
A much smaller bird. And the hawk doesn't just chase it. It attacks the eagle, clawing at its head. And the eagle, it does nothing.
It just cowers.
It submits. The text says it yields its body to the victor. Atassa is absolutely horrified. She realizes that her son, the great eagle of Persia, is in mortal danger from a much smaller foe.
And right on cue, as if on stage.
The messenger arrives.
Yeah.
And talk about a mood killer. He doesn't hold back. He doesn't sugarcoat it.
What's the line?
O walls of all the East, all is death.
That's it. All is death. And he just launches into this gruesome first-hand account of the Battle of Salamis.
Now, for the listener who might not be a history buff, Salamis was a massive naval battle. The Greeks basically lured the huge Persian fleet into these narrow straits where their numbers didn't matter.
It was a trap, pure and simple, cunning over brute force. The Persian ships were large and very difficult to maneuver in tight spaces. The Greek triremes were smaller, faster, more agile. Once they were all bottlenecked in those straits, the Persians couldn't retreat. They just started crashing into each other. It was absolute chaos. The messenger describes the carnage in just vivid detail and says the corpses were spread like tunnies, like tuna fish, crowded on the shore.
That image stuck with me so much. Men, warriors, the golden host we heard about at the beginning, reduced to fish rotting on a beach. It's so dehumanizing. It strips away all the glory and just shows the raw, biological reality of death on that scale.
It just conveys the sheer waste. He says the sea itself was invisible because of all the wreckage, and the breakdown of order is total. The great King Xerxes, who tried to yoke the world, he's described as just sitting on a hill, wailing, tearing his clothes, completely undone.
And notice the shift in the chorus. At the beginning of the play, they were proudly listing the names of the commanders. Now the messenger starts listing the very same names as casualties. The roll call of glory has become the roll call of death.
So the worst has happened. The army is destroyed. The king is on the run. The queen is devastated. And the chorus is wailing. What do they do? I mean, where do you go from there?
Well, they decide to call for backup, but not from an ally. They decide to call for backup from the grave.
They perform a necromancy.
They do. They summon the ghost of King Darius.
This scene is just wild. You have the queen and these old men chanting at a tomb, pouring out libations of wine and milk until the ghost of the old king literally rises up from the earth. It's like something out of a horror movie, but it's treated with such solemnity and desperation.
It's a scene of immense dramatic power. For them, Darius was the father figure of the empire. He represents the good old days when Persia was strong, but also wise. He was the standard. And they ask him the question that's on everyone's mind, why? Why did this happen? Was it just bad luck? Was it a storm? Did the gods just turn on us for no reason?
And Darius says no. He shuts that down immediately.
He absolutely rejects the idea of chance or random misfortune. He gives a verdict. He says this catastrophe is the direct result of hubris.
Okay, and this is where we really need to slow down and unpack this word. Because we use hubris today to mean, a CEO who gets a little too cocky and makes a bad business deal. But to the Greeks, and specifically in this play, it means something much more specific, much more severe, right?
Much more severe. In the Greek moral framework, There's a kind of sequence, a genealogy of ruin, you could call it.
Yeah.
It starts with olbos, which is prosperity, wealth.
Whoa.
You get rich.
Okay.
That often leads to choros, which is satiety or excess. You get full of yourself. You become complacent, you think you've earned it all, and that state of mind, that's what leads to hubris.
So hubris isn't just arrogance.
No.
Yeah.
It is a violent overreach. It's a willful act of stepping across a cosmic boundary, the boundary that separates man from the gods or man from the natural order. It's an act of aggression against reality itself.
And Darius points to a specific act of hubris. It wasn't just invading Greece, which was bad enough. It was how Xerxes did it.
Yes, it all comes back to the Hellespont.
The Hellespont is that strait of water that separates Asia from Europe.
Correct. And to get his massive army across, Xerxes built a bridge of boats. He had his engineers literally chain hundreds of boats together side by side and then lay planks across them to create a roadway.
Which, I mean, it sounds like pretty good engineering to me. Why is that a sin? Why is that hubris?
Because to the ancient mind, and specifically in Aeschylus' theology here, the Hellespont was not just a body of water. It was a holy stream. It was a god, Poseidon's realm. By bridging it, Xerxes was treating the sea like it was land. He was putting a yoke on the neck of the ocean.
Ah, there's that word again.
It's the same sin as in the dream. Darius's ghost calls it shackling the holy Hellespont like a slave.
He was trying to dominate nature. He wasn't just crossing a river. He was chaining a god.
He was trying to be more than a man. He thought he could bend the cosmos to his will. Darius says, this is a direct quote, he thought, mortal though he was, to overpower the gods. That is the absolute essence of hubris. And the result of hubris is always, without fail, nemesis.
Divine retribution.
Retribution. Justice. The balancing of the scales. Darius puts it plainly. Zeus is the chastiser of overweening pride. It's presented as a moral law of the universe, like gravity. If you try to become a god, reality will snap back and crush you.
Zeus is the chastiser of overweening pride. You know, that sounds a lot like the Bible, doesn't it?
It does. It sounds startlingly biblical. And this really brings us to our second segment. We need to diagnose this hubris and see how it aligns, and just as importantly, how it contrasts with the biblical worldview. Because Aeschylus is absolutely tapping into something profoundly true here.
Let's bring in the book of Daniel, because as I was reading about Xerxes, I couldn't help but think of another king who had a bit of an ego problem, Nebuchadnezzar.
The parallels are striking. Absolutely striking. You have Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 4. He's the king of Babylon, the empire that came just before Persia. So he's a kind of spiritual predecessor to this whole mindset. And he has this moment on his rooftop.
Right, he's walking on the roof of his royal palace. He looks out over the city.
And he says, "Is not this great Babylon which I have built by my mighty power as a royal residence and for the glory of my majesty?"
My mighty power, my majesty. It is the exact same spirit as Xerxes. Xerxes looks at the Hellespont and says, I will own you. Nebuchadnezzar looks at Babylon and says, I created you.
It's the delusion of self-sufficiency. It's the creature completely forgetting that he is a creature. It's taking credit for what God has given.
And the reaction from the divine in both stories is almost instant.
It is immediate. For Xerxes, it's the crushing defeat at Salamis. For Nebuchadnezzar, a voice falls from heaven while the words are still in his mouth. The kingdom has departed from you.
And he's driven mad. He lives like an animal. He eats grass like an ox.
Which is a fascinating and terrifyingly poetic inversion, isn't it?
Yeah.
He tried to be a god, so God made him a beast. Xerxes tried to master the sea, so the sea swallowed his fleet. There's a fittingness to the justice in both cases.
And I think here is where it gets really, really interesting. The ending is different. And this is where the Greek view and the biblical view start to really diverge.
The ending is absolutely crucial. Let's look at the end of the Persians. Xerxes comes home. He stumbles onto the stage. He's wearing rags. He is wailing. He beats his chest. The chorus beats their chests in response. It's a formal, ritual lament called a komos.
And that's it.
That's it. There is no repentance. There is no redemption. There is no restoration. The play ends in woe, woe. It's just hopeless, abject misery.
He's just broken. The messenger says he returns with an empty quiver.
He is completely broken. But now look at Nebuchadnezzar. He's been a beast for 7 years. His hair has grown like eagle's feathers, his nails like bird's claws. He's hit absolute rock bottom.
And what does he do? Nebuchadnezzar looks up.
That's the key. At the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to me, and I blessed the Most High. He repents. He actively acknowledges that God is God and he is not. And what happens then?
He gets his kingdom back.
Not just back. The text says, "My majesty and splendor returned to me, and I was established in my kingdom, and excellent majesty was added to me." He's restored and even elevated.
So the Bible offers a redemptive arc that Greek tragedy simply doesn't have.
It doesn't. In the Greek world, if you commit hubris and cross that line, you get crushed. End of story. In the biblical world, if you cross the line and get crushed, you can look up. You can repent. God chastises, but his goal in chastisement isn't just to punish, it's to restore.
That is a huge difference. One worldview is essentially fatalistic, the other is built on the possibility of grace.
Exactly. And there's another image, a visual metaphor, that connects these two stories, which I think is worth bringing up. And that's the image of the tree.
Oh, right, the world tree. This is in both Ezekiel and Daniel, isn't it?
Yes. In Daniel 4, that's Nebuchadnezzar's own dream before he falls. He dreams of a massive tree that reaches to heaven. It's visible to the ends of the earth. Animals take shelter under it. Birds nest in its branches. It's a clear symbol of his global empire.
And Ezekiel 31 uses the same image for Assyria and Egypt. A cedar in Lebanon, towering above the clouds, the envy of all the trees in Eden.
Right. And in both cases, why is the tree cut down? Ezekiel says it explicitly. Because it towered high and set its top among the clouds, and its heart was proud of its height.
It's the Tower of Babel impulse all over again, trying to touch heaven.
It is. And some of the sources we're looking at describe God as the woodsman of history. I love that phrase. When a tree gets too tall, when it tries to rival the heavens, the axe comes out.
God is the woodsman. That is a chilling image. Xerxes was a tall tree. Nebuchadnezzar was a tall tree. And the axe fell on both of them.
But again, think about the difference. In Daniel, the divine command is to cut the tree down, but leave the stump of its roots in the earth. There's a hope of regrowth. The stump of Nebuchadnezzar was allowed to sprout again after he repented. With Xerxes, we just hear the timber falling.
So we have this perfect picture of the natural man at his absolute peak of power. Xerxes, Nebuchadnezzar. They grasp at godhood and they fall. Now, I want to pivot. This is the heart of our deep dive today, the negative photo idea.
Let's go there. This is where we bring the gospel into the theater of Dionysus. This is where we see how reading this bleak pagan tragedy can actually, paradoxically, fuel our love for Christ.
So if Xerxes is the negative, who is the positive? We've already hinted at it. It's Jesus. But specifically, the Jesus we see described in Philippians chapter 2.
This is one of the most profound, dense, beautiful theological passages in the entire New Testament. It's often called the Carmen Christi, the hymn of Christ. And when you read it side by side with the Persians, the contrast is blinding. It creates a vacuum that only Christ can possibly fill.
Okay, so let's walk through the trajectory. Let's start with the grasp.
Okay, so Xerxes is a man who tries to become a god. He builds bridges to chain the sea. He invades lands that aren't his. He grasps at power. He grasps at a divine status he does not possess.
And Philippians 2, verse 6 says of Jesus, who, being in very nature God,
did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage, or as some other great translations say, a thing to be grasped.
Stop right there. That is the pivot point of all of history, isn't it? Xerxes is a mere man trying to snatch equality with God. Jesus is equal with God, and he chooses not to clutch it. He lets it go.
He opens his hand. Xerxes clutches. Christ releases. This is the doctrine of kenosis. It's the Greek word for self-emptying. Xerxes tries to fill himself up with the world, with power, with glory. Christ, who is already full of glory, willingly empties himself to save the world.
And let's look at the result of these two different paths. Xerxes grasps for glory, and what does he get?
Humiliation. Shame. Involuntary humiliation.
He is forced to his knees. He doesn't want to be there. He is wailing because he lost. He is ashamed because his pride was shattered.
But Jesus, what does Philippians say?
He humbled himself. It was voluntary. By becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross, Jesus chooses the humiliation that Xerxes fears most.
That is such a key distinction. Xerxes tears his clothes because he failed. Christ allows his clothes to be stripped from him because he is succeeding in his mission.
Let's talk about those robes for a second. The imagery is so powerful.
It really is. In the play, one of the most shocking moments for the Persian court is when the messenger describes Xerxes tearing his royal robes in agony. And then at the very end, he enters the stage in tatters. The torn robe is the external symbol of his internal shame, his failure. He's exposed.
Now look at the Gospels. At the crucifixion, Jesus is stripped of his robes by the soldiers. They even put a purple robe on him to mock his kingship, then tear it off again. He hangs on the cross naked.
See the difference? Xerxes' robes are torn because of his own pride and its consequences. Jesus allows his robes to be taken to cover the sham of others. He bears the shame that Xerxes and you and I deserved.
And the yoke, let's go back to the yoke. We talked about Atas's dream. Xerxes tries to force a yoke on Greece, a yoke of slavery.
And it breaks. It's a disaster. It leads to war and untold death. It provokes rebellion. It's a yoke of oppression.
And Jesus says in Matthew 11,
Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
Xerxes forces a yoke of iron that destroys. Christ offers a yoke of wood, the carpentry of a savior that brings rest to the soul.
It's a complete and total reversal. One is an act of domination. The other is an invitation to partnership and discipleship. Xerxes wants subjects to serve him. Christ wants brothers and sisters to walk with him.
And we can't forget the bridge. This one is huge.
Yeah.
Xerxes builds a bridge to destroy.
A bridge of boats, a marvel of engineering, built to march an army across for the purpose of conquest and subjugation. It was a bridge of war.
And Christ.
He becomes the bridge. The New Testament calls him the mediator. The old Latin word was pontifex, which literally means bridge builder. He becomes the bridge between a holy God and sinful man, not to conquer man, but to reconcile man to God.
Xerxes crossed the water to kill. Christ crossed the chasm of sin to bring life.
It really is a perfect negative photo. Every shadow in the story of Xerxes is a brilliant light in the story of Christ.
And this brings us to what you called the theology of reversal. You mentioned James 4.6 earlier.
Yes, and 1 Peter 5.5 says the same thing. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble.
In the Persians, we see the first half of that verse in high definition. God or Zeus, in their understanding, opposing the proud. That is the entire plot of the play. And it ends there. God wins, proud man loses. That is the tragedy.
But the gospel is not a tragedy. It gives us the second half of the verse.
But gives grace to the humble.
And the ultimate example of that humble one is Christ himself. And because he humbled himself, what does Philippians say happens next? What's the result of his self-emptying?
Therefore God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name.
So Xerxes ends in the dirt. Christ ends on the throne. But the crucial part is, he gets to the throne by going through the dirt. Xerxes tried to jump straight to the throne and fell into the dirt. That is the great paradox of the kingdom of God. The way up is down.
The way up is down. That's the bumper sticker for this entire deep dive.
It really is. It's the fundamental law of the spiritual universe. And realizing this, truly letting it sink in, should fundamentally change our affections. It should change what we love.
How so?
Because when we look at Xerxes, we see the sheer ugliness of self-exaltation. It's repulsive. It leads to ruin and death and weeping. But when we look at Christ, who had every right to be exalted, who was God, but chose the dirt for our sake, that is magnetic. That kind of love, that kind of humility, it just draws you in. It demands love in return.
So we've analyzed the play, we've diagnosed the hubris, we've seen this incredible contrast with Christ. Now, we need to bring this home. Let's get into the application. What does this mean for the person listening to this right now? Because most of us aren't emperors bridging the Hellespont. We aren't leading massive armies into battle.
No, but we all have a little Xerxes inside of us.
A little Xerxes. I like that. Or maybe I hate that, actually. It's uncomfortably true.
It should be uncomfortable. We all have that impulse to bridge our own little Hellesponts in our daily lives, to force an outcome at work, to manipulate the people around us to get what we want, to look at our career or our family or our ministry and say, is not this great Babylon which I have built?
We try to dominate our environment. We try to be the sovereign over our little kingdoms.
We do. And the New Testament gives us very practical, very sharp warnings about this. Look at 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 6. This is about choosing leaders in the church. Paul says a leader must not be a recent convert, and he gives a specific reason why.
Lest he become puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil.
Puffed up. The Greek word there is typhou. It literally means to be wrapped in smoke, or to be blinded by smoke. That is exactly what happened to Xerxes. He was blinded by his own press clippings. He was blinded by the smoke of his own ego. He thought he was invincible.
So he couldn't see the reality of the rocks at Salamis.
Because of the smoke of his own conceit. He was living in a different reality.
So, for the learner listening to this, whether you are leading a sales team or raising kids or planting a church or just trying to manage your own life, the warning is, don't believe your own hype.
And don't try to force your will on reality. Christian leadership, true authority, comes from kenosis. It comes from emptying yourself, from serving others, not from accumulating power. If you find yourself bringing the Hellespont forcing, driving, crushing opposition just to get your way, you are in Xerxes' territory, and the axe of the woodsman is coming for that tree.
That is a very sobering thought, but there's another application here too, I think, and it goes back to the vibe of the play that we started with, the lament.
Yes, this is something the modern West, and I would say especially modern Western Christianity, is not very good at.
Yeah.
We like happy endings, we like victories, we want the resurrection without having to deal with the crucifixion.
We want to skip Good Friday to get to Easter morning. We want the upbeat worship song, not the dirge.
We do. But the Persians forces us to sit in the ashes. The whole play is one long cry of grief. It forces us to listen to the wailing of the defeated. And there's a real spiritual discipline in that.
Learning to grieve.
Learning to grieve the cost of sin, learning what sin actually produces. When we see Xerxes in rags, we should grieve the wreckage that human pride causes in the world. We should look at the wars, the broken families, the ruined lives caused by little Xerxes everywhere, our own and others, and we should weep. We should know what it feels like to say, whoa, whoa.
And there's an empathy piece there, too. Remember, Aeschylus was a Greek. He fought these people. These were the men who burned Athens, and yet he wrote a play asking his fellow Greeks to weep for Persian mothers and wives.
That is extraordinary. Can you imagine that today? Imagine a Ukrainian playwright in the middle of the war writing a tragedy from the perspective of a Russian mother losing her son. It requires a massive, almost supernatural leap of empathy.
It requires seeing the enemy not just as a target, but as a human being who is also suffering under the weight of sin and judgment.
It aligns with Christ's most difficult command, doesn't it? Love your enemies. It recognizes their humanity. It recognizes that they, too, are subject to the same cosmic laws of pride and destruction. They, too, suffer when they or their leaders try to play God. It humanizes the other.
So reading the Persians can actually train our hearts to obey the Sermon on the Mount? That's wild.
It's plundering the Egyptians. We take their tragedy and we let it soften our hearts. We let it teach us to mourn what God mourns.
I want to circle back to one final devotional thought before we wrap this all up. We talked about the rags.
Yes, the powerful visual of the ruined king.
At the end of the play, Xerxes is standing there. His fancy robes are torn. He has an empty quiver. He's totally exposed. He has lost everything.
It is the natural end of all human ambition that excludes God. You end up with nothing. You end up naked and ashamed. It's the story from Eden to today.
But when we look at the cross,
We see the King of Kings in voluntary rags. He hangs there, stripped and bleeding. But the question is, why? Why is he there? He is there to take the nemesis that Xerxes deserved. He is there to take the nemesis that we deserve. We are the ones who committed the hubris. We are the ones who tried to be our own gods. We are the ones who built the Babel towers in our careers and our relationships. We are the ones who tried to chain the sea.
and he is the one who took the blow.
He took the lightning bolt from Zeus, the axe that fell on Nebuchadnezzar's tree, the catastrophe that fell on Xerxes' fleet, that judgment fell on Christ. He became the worm and not a man so that we could become sons and daughters. He took the woe, woe of the tragic chorus so we could sing hallelujah.
That changes how you read the play. It changes how you read everything, really.
It should make us love him more. When you see what pride does to Xerxes, how ugly and destructive it is, and then you see what humility did in Christ, what it accomplished. How can you not worship? How can you not want to follow that humble king?
Wow. Okay. Let's try to unpack where we've been, because we have covered a lot of ground, from ancient Athens to the Hellespont to Babylon and all the way to Golgotha.
We really did. We started with a ghost story of empire. We saw how Aeschylus, this pagan playwright, brilliantly diagnosed the problem of hubris, the violent pride that tries to yoke the world to its own will.
Then we saw the biblical parallel in Nebuchadnezzar, the same pride, the same fall, but with that crucial window of repentance that points toward grace.
Then we came to the great contrast. Xerxes, the man grasping at godhood and falling into shame. Christ, the God who was, releasing godhood to take on servanthood and rising to glory.
And finally, we talked about the application, the little Xerxes in all of us, the need to kill that pride before it kills us, and the forgotten spiritual discipline of learning how to lament.
It's a journey from the hubris of Susa to the humility of Calvary.
So here's the question we want to leave you with. It's a bit provocative, but that's what we do here in these deep dives.
Xerxes returned home to find his faithful elders in a broken empire, with nothing to show for it but an empty quiver. Christ returned home to the Father with the keys to death and Hades and a multitude of captives set free.
Which king are you trying to emulate in your career, in your family, and in your spiritual life? Are you building a bridge of boats to conquer, or are you laying down your life to serve?
The answer to that question determines how your story ends, in a lament or in a resurrection.
Something to chew on. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye.